Hi, I'm Lori Rozakis. Welcome to Video Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series. This is the 6th program in the series, Connections and Transitions. Connections and transitions are linking devices. Why are connections and transitions important? Well, they serve many functions. First, they guide your reader through your writing. They prepare your reader for the ideas to come. They show that events happen in a specific order. Connections and transitions also point out key ideas and link related ideas. As a result, connections and transitions help you create unity and coherence. This helps you create a smooth and flowing style. Nonetheless, there are some common errors that you can make when you use linking devices. First of all, the obvious error is not using any at all, because if you don't, your ideas can be very choppy, and then your writing will not hold together. Another common error is using the wrong word or phrase, so you're not making the connection that you want. In addition, you can link unrelated ideas. If you do that, your writing doesn't have any logic, and you'll confuse your reader. And last, you can use too many linking devices and create a series of obtrusive, stringy sentences, very much like pearls, where you just link one after the other in a relatively boring way. So let's take a look now at how you use linking devices and some of the most common ones. They are transitions, repetition, parallelism, and referrals. Let's start with transitions. Each transition shows a very specific relationship, so you want to choose your transitions carefully. Some transitions, for instance, show time relationships, while others show contrast. Certain transitions show that one action is the result of another action. Some transitions show that examples will follow. Let's look at each type of transition now. Here are some transitions that show addition. Again, and, besides, for example, furthermore, moreover, then, also, another, finally, further, in addition, next, and to. If you look at these transitions closely, you'll see that some of them can be used in the beginning of a sentence, some of them can be used to connect sentences, and some of them can be used at the end of a sentence. Some of them can be used anywhere in the sentence where they make sense. For example, you might open a sentence with "for example," and you might use, let's say, "to" at the end of a sentence, and can go at the beginning of a sentence or in the middle of a sentence. You might have been told not to start with a word like "and" or with a word like "but." And I would say you can, but do that more in informal writing. In formal writing, you probably do want to avoid starting with a transition such as "and" or "but." Here are some transitions that show cause and effect. Recall that cause is why something happens. Effect is the result of that. Accordingly, because, for that reason, therefore, so, as a result, consequently, hence, since, and thus. As with the previous transitions you just learned, you can use these in different places in the sentence, primarily in the beginning and in the middle. You would pick the place that helps you create logic, unity, and coherence. Here are some transitions that show examples. Well, the obvious one is "for example." You can also use "for instance," in particular, in this case, namely, to illustrate, and specifically. You would like to vary these so it doesn't get tedious for your reader. So you might use, for example, once or twice, and then for instance, perhaps once or twice. There are also transitions that show comparison and contrast. Remember that when you compare, you show how things are similar. When you contrast, you show how they are different. And there are quite a few of these because there are many instances when you're going to want to show that things are similar and different. These are different from, in comparison, in the same way, like, likewise, on the one hand, same as, similarly, however, in contrast, on the contrary, unlike, nonetheless, on the other hand, but, yet, instead, and rather. Take a look at these and you'll see the ones that show how things are similar and you'll see the ones that show how things are different. For example, like, likewise, same as, and similarly show how things are similar. Whereas in contrast, on the contrary, unlike show how things are different. So you're going to choose the specific word that shows the relationship that you have established in your writing. Now here are some transitions that show concession. And when you show concession, you admit there is another side to the issue. Although, certainly, granted, naturally, no doubt, of course, though, to be sure, and whereas. You're going to want to do this when you're constructing an argument because it makes your writing much more persuasive to show that the opposition has made some valid points. What you're going to show is that your points are more valid. They are stronger than the opposition. And using transitions will help you do this. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program to practice what you just learned about transitions. Link related sentences with the appropriate transition to create unity, logic, and cohesion. Then come back. Here's my sample answer. It may vary from yours, but notice how I use transitions to link ideas. Jacques Cartier established the colony of New France in 1534. I left that sentence alone. The French did little with their colony for more than 60 years because they were involved in long, costly wars within Europe. I linked those ideas to show cause and effect. However, some French did begin fishing off the coast of New France and established a fur trade with the Native Americans. I used the transition however to show contrast, and I used and to link ideas. Although, concession, no one would have predicted it, this fur trade would soon bring great wealth to France. So I linked ideas with these transitions, because, however, and although. In so doing, I linked related ideas to make my writing more logical and therefore much stronger. Let's continue. In your study guide, you'll find more lists of words and phrases that can be used to create additional kinds of transitions. For example, we've included transitions that show importance, location, summary, result, chronology, and qualification, to mention just some of them. Take a look at these lists now. Here are some examples drawn from these lists. Since pharaohs were considered gods, all things in ancient Egypt belonged to them. Notice the transition, since. The pharaohs charged taxes on everything produced in Egypt. As a result, the pharaohs were fabulously wealthy. Notice the transition as a result. Also notice, by the way, the semicolon before as a result and the comma after. I'm using a semicolon there to separate two complete sentences and a comma after result because I can take that transition out. It's a very standard and a very useful way to construct your sentences. Another example, however, no money passed hands because money did not exist at that time. This sentence has two transitions, however and because. Therefore, I'm linking it by showing two different relationships that make logical sense. And finally, here's another example. Instead, goods of equal value were traded. For example, craft workers received clothes and food for their efforts. Notice the transitions instead and for example. Take a second and take a look back at that second sentence, the one that has as a result. Compare that to the last sentence that has for example. Exactly the same construction. I have two independent clauses separated by semicolons, and I have my transitions placed there to create added logic and unity. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and link each pair of sentences with the appropriate transition. Explain why you chose the transition, then come back. Here are my sample answers. The train stopped running at midnight. Consequently, the tourists walked a mile back to their hotel. I could also have used as a result because both consequently and as a result show cause and effect. You'll choose the one that you like best given your purpose, your audience, and your individual writing style. Number 2. We may soon be eating food from sea farms. For example, algae is a high-protein crop that shows great promise. I used for example. I could also have used for instance or specifically. All three of those transitions show example. Number 3, Rita has so many chores. She has to do the laundry and feed the pets. Worst of all, she has to wash the floor. I chose worst of all. I could also have used finally or lastly. All three of those transitions show importance. So they show that I'm building from laundry, feed the pets, to the last one, she has to wash the floor. Number 4, on the one hand, Mark wants to lose weight. On the other hand, he is not willing to modify his diet or do exercise. I chose on the one hand and on the other hand. I could have used but or nevertheless. They show comparison or contrast. So returning for a moment to the beginning, I've done cause and effect, I've used example, I've used order of importance, and I've used comparison and contrast. So I've used my transitions to create unity and cohesion and logic in my writing. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and turn to your study guide. Cross out the words that are not transitions. You may want to refer to the lists that you've gotten earlier. Then come back. Here are the answers. All of the words are transitions except these words: homemaker, lukewarm, attractive, clock, rambling, eerie, and intelligent. Well, how can you figure out whether or not a word can be used as a transition in a sentence? Here's one way. you can try plugging it into a sentence and seeing if it makes sense. Well, for example, blank, Joe washed the dishes. And you would take one of the words and you'd put it in the blank. Or, Fred had cooked the dinner, blank, Joe washed the dishes. And you put that word in that blank. Fred had cooked the dinner, blank, he also washed the dishes. Or, blank, Fred had cooked the dinner, Joe washed the dishes. Here's one more. Blank, the fact that Fred had cooked the dinner, he also washed the dishes. If the word makes sense in one of these sentences, it might make an effective transition. Since, for example, works in the fourth sentence. So you could say, since Fred had cooked the dinner, Joe washed the dishes. That same sentence you could also use because. Because Fred had cooked the dinner, Joe washed the dishes. Or let's take a look at the third sentence. Fred had cooked the dinner, fill in that blank, nevertheless, he also washed the dishes. So you take each transition, you put it in the blank, and you see if it makes sense. Taking the word lukewarm, for example, you can see that it doesn't make sense in any of these sentences. For example, lukewarm, Joe washed the dishes. Or Fred cooked the dinner, lukewarm, Joe washed the dishes. That tells you that lukewarm cannot be used as a transition. So as you're trying to figure it out, make up sentences like these, plug the transitions in, and see if they make sense. That's one good way to help you tell which one to use and when to use it. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage. Decide why it seems choppy and disconnected. Ask yourself, why is the writing boring? Why is it difficult to follow the ideas? Then come back. The passage seems choppy and disconnected because the writer doesn't use any transitions at all. As a result, the passage lacks unity and cohesion. For example, the modern game of soccer was developed from the 8th to the 19th century in England. A formal set of rules was adopted. Other countries accepted these rules. There's no link, there's no connection among these three sentences. So we have sentence, sentence, sentence. It's almost like a necklace with a series of pearls. There's nothing linking that together. As a result, the ideas seem to be merely a group of jumbled ideas placed together rather than a logical development of a thesis. You're not showing the relationship between and among the ideas. You don't know what caused one event to happen, what was a problem and a solution. There's no link there. In addition, it's a very boring passage. That's because the style is merely a string of loosely connected, simple sentences. Listen while I read it, and you'll hear how tedious the style is. The modern game of soccer was developed from the 8th to the 19th century in England. A formal set of rules was adopted. Other countries accepted these rules. International matches were held. Great Britain ruled colonies all over the world. British traders, soldiers, and sailors introduced the game to many parts of Asia, Africa, and the Americas. It's bump, bump, bump. We don't know what caused what to happen. Not good writing. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage again. Decide where transitions are needed. Look for ideas that are related to one another, especially those that show cause and effect. Remember, cause is what happened. Effect is the result. Mark those spots in the passage. Then come back. Let's take a look at these answers. The modern game of soccer was developed from the 8th to the 19th century in England. We'll leave that sentence alone. That's our introduction. But right here, I need something to link ideas. I need a transition. So I'll put a blank in there. I'll mark that. Blank, a formal set of rules was adopted. Other countries accepted these rules. I think there's something missing in there too. So I'll put a blank in there. International matches were held, because I'm seeing a cause and effect relationship between other countries accepting the rules and international matches being held. Great Britain ruled colonies. Well, I need something to open that, to introduce that, and to link that to the previous sentence. So I'll put a blank there as well. So what I've done is I've marked 3 places where I think transitions are needed. I need one in the second sentence. I need one in between other countries accepted these rules, international matches were held, and I need one before Great Britain. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage again. This time, add the transitions that best link related ideas. You've already marked those spots in the passage. I provided a list that you can choose from. What you're doing here is exactly what you do when you write. You put down your ideas, as you learned in a previous program, and then what you do is you read it over and you decide how you can make it better. One good way to make it better is by adding connections and transitions. And now you've read it over and you've marked the places where you want to add those connections. Now you're going to go back and add those actual connections. So what we're doing here is the writing process. Writing, revising, editing, revising, back and forth till we get it exactly the way that we want it. After you finish this activity, come back. Here's how I did it. Your answer may vary a little bit from mine, but make sure that you chose the transitions that show the relationships that you want. The modern game of soccer was developed from the 8th to the 19th century in England. I put here the date because I thought that made the most sense. In 1863, a formal set of rules was adopted. I wanted to know exactly when. So I went for a transition that showed time. Other countries accepted these rules. Consequently, international matches were held. Well, the consequently gives me the cause and effect. Because the countries accepted these rules, international matches were held. At this time, Great Britain ruled colonies. Well, I wanted another one there having to do with chronology. I wanted to know where I was exactly in the order of time. So I put at this time. Now, by adding in 1863, consequently, at this time, I've created unity and coherence by linking related ideas. Always remember that when you're using transitions, be sure to link ideas that are related. Don't just link things for the sake of linking. You have to show a specific relationship. Cause and effect, time order, problem solution. Whatever that relationship is, make sure that you are linking together ideas that truly fit together. And that's what we have done in this passage. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read this passage. Decide why it seems illogical, why it doesn't seem to make any sense. Ask yourself these questions. Why is it hard to follow these ideas? What's missing that could make this paragraph better? Then come back. Here's what I found when I read it. The passage seemed very illogical to me because the writer uses the wrong transitions. Remember what we just said about linking related ideas. All transitions are not the same, as you learned. Each transition shows a different type of relationship. You've got to pick the transitions that show the relationship that you need. And since this writer did not, the passage doesn't make any sense. It leaves you wondering, what is this writer talking about? How do these ideas fit together? As you can see, using the wrong linking device is just as confusing to your readers as using no linking device at all. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program, read that passage again. Decide which transitions are incorrect. Look for ideas that are related to each other, especially those that show time and cause and effect. Mark those spots in the passage. You will find 5 errors. So what you're going to have to do here is first identify the transitions. You may want to go back and look at those lists. And then find the relationship and see why the transitions are not correct. Then come back. Here's my answer. Besides the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, Spain was a divided country. Well, besides makes no sense at all because it's the wrong word. It doesn't show any relationship between those particular word groups. Beside doesn't show cause or effect or anything of the nature, so obviously that is incorrect. A large group of Spanish people hated Spain's ruler, General Franco. For instance, he had complete power over the country. For instance doesn't make any sense there either because we're not giving a list of items. The people against General Franco called themselves the Resistance. They wanted to defeat Franco's government, so Franco was a powerful leader. So shows result. They wanted to defeat him, so he was a leader, makes no sense. Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, supported Franco. Mussolini was the leader of fascist Italy. So far, besides, for instance, and so are not showing the correct relationships that I need with these sentences. On May 8th, 1945, the war ended in Europe for the Japanese fought on. Well, as that's written, it suggests that the war ended because the Japanese fought on, which makes no sense whatsoever. The Allies, led by the Americans, ended World War II by dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The Japanese namely surrendered on August 14th, 1945. The namely has absolutely no logic there either. They namely surrendered means nothing. So now in this particular paragraph, I have for and namely. So my mistakes are besides, for instance, so, for, and namely. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage again. This time, add the transitions that best link the ideas. I provided a list for you to choose from. Read the list over, and as you did previously with those sentences, put the words in and see which ones give you the relationships that you need to create logic and unity and coherence. Then come back. Here's my answer. During the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, Spain was a divided country. I used during to show time. I'm showing while the Spanish Civil War was going on, Spain was a divided country. So I've linked the two with a transition that makes sense. A large group of Spanish people hated Spain's ruler, General Franco. However, he had complete power over the country. The however shows contrast. They hated him, but he had complete power. So I've shown the relationship between those two. The people against General Franco called themselves the Resistance. They wanted to defeat Franco's government, yet Franco was a powerful leader. Again, I'm showing the relationship with yet. Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, supported Franco. Mussolini was the leader of fascist Italy. On May 8, 1945, the war ended in Europe, but the Japanese fought on. I'm using the but to show a contrast. The war ended. However, nevertheless, or but, the Japanese continued to fight. The Allies, led by the Americans, ended World War II by dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The Japanese finally surrendered on August 14, 1945. The finally makes sense there because it shows that there was a length of time between May 8, 1945 and August 14th. So by using finally, I'm showing the duration of time. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read this passage. Decide why it is difficult to follow this writer's ideas. Ask yourself, why does this passage sound awkward to me? Why does it sound odd? Why doesn't it make sense? Then come back. It's difficult to follow this writer's ideas because this writer has gone the other way. This writer has linked too many ideas. So we've looked at writers that use few transitions or no transitions, writers that use the wrong transitions. Now we're looking at a writer who uses too many transitions, sort of like the Three Bears. There are so many transitions that we have too much of a good thing. As a result, notice that transition, the transitions get in the way of the paragraph. They become obtrusive, they stick out. The writer has created something that we call a stringy sentence that's using too many transitions to link ideas. Again, it's like a row of beads, one right after the other, or a row of bricks. They're all the same. One is not subordinate to the other. There's no relationship between them. So the writing becomes boring, the writing becomes very illogical, and very awkward. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage again. This time, find the transitions and underline them. Then come back. Here's my answer. The Carolina parakeet was the only parrot native to the eastern United States, and it had green on its back, yellow on its head, and orange on its cheeks, although the largest Carolina parakeets were 13 inches long, including their tail feathers. I found 2 transitions there, and although. The and occurs right with those words, it had green on its back. The although is right before the largest Carolina parakeets. Don't be confused by the and by orange. It had green on its back, yellow on its head, and orange on its cheeks. That you need because that is part of the items in a series. I have 3 items in that series. Green on its back, yellow on its head, orange on its cheeks. To connect those 3 items, I have to use the word and. So that's functioning differently than the ands I'm using to connect my stringy sentences. Moving on. They once lived throughout the Southeast, as far north as Virginia and as far west as Texas. Parrots are among the smartest of birds. However, farmers thought these fruit eaters were pests, so they shot them from the skies, and the Carolina parakeet became extinct in the 1920s. As a result, so all that's left are stuffed examples of this bird in museums. In this part of the paragraph, I found however, so, and, as a result, and so. So many transitions that my sentences are linked together almost, again, like a string of pearls. They just sound too stringy and too drawn out. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage again. This time, decide which transitions to keep and which ones to delete. Remember to link related ideas. You may have to start and end sentences. In other words, you're not going to move any big chunks around, but you may end at this point, you may start at that point. Then come back. Here's my answer. Your answer may differ a little bit. The Carolina parakeet was the only parrot native to the eastern United States. It had green on its back, yellow on its head, and orange on its cheeks. The largest Carolina parakeets were 13 inches long, including their tail feathers. They once lived throughout the southeast, as far north as Virginia and as far west as Texas. Parrots are among the smartest of birds. However, farmers thought these fruit eaters were pests, so they shot them from the skies. The Carolina parakeet became extinct in the 1920s as a result. All that's left are stuffed examples of this bird in museums. So what have we done here? Well, we've created an interesting style by mixing short, medium, and long sentences. Remember that you're always working with your audience and your reader. What you want to do is suit your sentence length and your sentence content to your audience. So for example, if you're writing for small children, you might use shorter sentences. If you're writing for a more adult audience, you would use longer sentences. But overall, high school, junior high school, college, when you're about that age, mixing different kinds of sentences makes for the most interesting style. So I've got the Carolina parakeet was the only parrot native to the eastern United States. Relatively short, simple sentence. It had green on its back, yellow on its head, and orange on its cheeks. The same. Then I get something interesting. Something like this. Parrots are among the smartest of birds. However, farmers thought these fruit eaters were pests, so they shot them from the skies. That's a long sentence. The long sentence becomes very interesting because it's set among the shorter sentences. A paragraph of only short sentences would be relatively tedious. A paragraph of only long sentences would be relatively tedious. But the long sentence, mixed in with the shorter sentences, creates a varied and interesting style. So when you're deciding which transitions to use, not only should you look for logic and cohesion, but you should also look to create an interesting and varied style by mixing short, medium, and long sentences. Don't just mix them like throwing spices into a pot, but decide which ideas fit together the best and which sentences would make the most sense if they were long, which sentences would make the most sense if they're short. Here's the rule that I use. In general, the more complex the idea, the simpler the sentence. The simpler the idea, the more complex the sentence you can have. Because your overall purpose is always to communicate with your audience. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and decide what's wrong with the following passage. Choose from these 3 problems. Perhaps the writer linked unrelated ideas. Maybe the writer used too many linking devices, so they became obtrusive and created what we called stringy sentences. Or maybe the writer used the wrong transition. Again, maybe the writer linked unrelated ideas, the writer used too many linking devices, or the writer used the wrong transitions. Then come back. Here's my answer. In this paragraph, the writer used too many linking devices. The linking devices, the transitions and the connections, became obtrusive because there were so many of them. Remember, we call this a stringy sentence. It's really too much of a good thing. As a result, readers find it very difficult to follow the writer's ideas because everything is linked. And by linking everything, in effect, you're linking nothing because you're not showing the relationship between and among ideas. The sentences lack style. The ideas do not flow smoothly at all. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and rewrite this paragraph. I know you can do a better job than this writer did. What I need you to do is make the connections more logical. Then come back. Here's my answer. The Pony Express was a short but interesting chapter in American history. I like the but there. I think it makes a lot of sense. It was the creation of Alexander Major, William Waddell, and William Russell, three men who made and lost a lot of money in the Old West. All three men had business acumen and money to invest, but it was Russell who got the Pony Express off to a great start because he had the support of influential people in Washington, D.C. So now what I've done is I have the first sentence is short. The Pony Express was a short but interesting chapter in American history. It was the creation is a little bit longer. Then I get to the third sentence. It's longer still. The last sentence goes back to my shorter format. From then, it took him only 2 months to establish the Overland Mail Express. So what I've got is I've linked related ideas by using the correct transitions, and I've created a more interesting and diverse style by mixing some medium-length sentences with one relatively long sentence. This makes the paragraph a lot more interesting to read and will get your reader's attention. Another way to create unity and cohesion and logic is through repetition. And when you use repetition, you repeat things. You can repeat key words, you can repeat phrases, you can repeat clauses, and you can repeat sounds. Key words is obvious. You pick one word that has a lot of importance and you repeat it for unity, for logic, and for emphasis. Remember that phrases are word groups that do not have a subject or a verb. Clauses are word groups that do have a subject and a verb. They can be independent or dependent. And sounds can be any sound that you feel would make your writing more logical and more cohesive. Now be careful with this. Use repetition as a stylistic device, but don't pad your writing by just repeating things to make a word count, because then you're not using it effectively. Here's an example from Charles Dickens in A Tale of Two Cities. As I read it, I'll emphasize the repetition. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. So he takes that phrase, it was the, and he repeats it to unify his writing. Then he changes the pattern so it doesn't get boring. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. Now, we didn't highlight all of the parallelism here. You can take a look at this when you have a chance and find more examples. Now, obviously Dickens was a master stylist, and he took great care in choosing repetition to unify his writing. Study this example and you'll see how effectively it links ideas. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and to find the repetition in the excerpt from George Bernard Shaw's Getting Married. Then come back. There are couples who dislike one another furiously for several hours at a time. There are couples who dislike one another permanently. And there are couples who never dislike one another, but these last are people who are incapable of disliking anybody. The repetition is, there are couples who dislike one another. We have that twice. And then he does it again a little bit shorter. There are couples who. And then he takes the word dislike and he carries that 2 more times with dislike and disliking. By doing this, he has unified his ideas and created a very smooth and flowing style. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and decide what is wrong with the following passage. There are 2 things that could be wrong, and I'll tell you right now, only one is. Choose from these 2 problems. Either the writer has linked unrelated ideas, or the writer is using faulty parallelism. Figure out which of these problems it is, and then come back. I'm going to use process of elimination on this. In order to be classified as great, a baseball player must hit with power. A high lifetime batting average is necessary to field well. The player must also be a quick runner and throwing with strength and precision. Well, the ideas seem linked to me. I mean, in order to be great, the player has to be able to hit, has to have a good lifetime batting average, and field well. This makes sense because all of these things do make a great player. So I'm going to say it can't be linking unrelated ideas. It has to be faulty parallelism. And indeed it is. Remember that when you're writing about things within one sentence, each item in the series should be in the same form as the other item. We call this parallelism. Parallel, like parallel railroad tracks or parallel lines. Things match. We're talking about the same form. We mean you match parts of speech. You match nouns to nouns, verbs to verbs, adjectives to adjectives, adverbs to adverbs. You're matching parts of speech. In addition, you're matching grammatical forms. So, for example, you'll match phrases to phrases. You'll match clauses to clauses. When you do have parallelism, your sentences sound smooth and logical. When you have faulty parallelism, as we call it, your sentences sound jarring and your ideas are not conveyed to your reader. So you want to use parallelism to create logic. You also want to use parallelism to create style. Parallel structures have greater style because they sound better to our ear. Most famous speeches have parallelism. For example, JFK is famous. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Or I came, I saw, I conquered. As we match structures, we create memorable turns of phrase. So you want to use parallelism not only to create connections within your writing, but also to create a smooth style. We've been discussing this throughout the entire program. So I've been saying to you, use some short sentences, some medium sentences, and some long sentences to create a varied style. Now I'm saying use parallelism to create an interesting style, a smooth style, a memorable style, actually a melodic, even a lyric style. It'll make your writing sound good. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and correct the faulty parallelism in the paragraph about baseball players. Then come back. Here's my answer. In order to be classified as great, a baseball player must hit with power, achieve a high lifetime batting average, and field well. The player must also run quickly and throw with strength and precision. Here's my parallelism. Hit with power, achieve a high lifetime batting average, and field well, all in the same grammatical form. Second parallelism. Run quickly. Second one, throw with strength and precision. By paralleling them, I've created a smooth, rhythmic, and logical sound. So you can use parallelism to link related ideas and to make your writing more logical. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and find the parallelism in the transcript of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Then come back. "Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." The two phrases, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition, are parallel. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. That nation and any nation are parallel, so conceived and so dedicated are parallel. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. Here gave their lives, this nation might live, are both parallel. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. The words fitting and proper are parallel. Now, purposely, I haven't found every single example of parallelism here. I've left a couple for you to find, because the entire speech is filled with parallel structure to make it smooth and flowing as well as memorable. Let's take a look at the second half. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, and we cannot hallow are all parallel. The brave men, living and dead, parallel, single words, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. Words add or detract are parallel. They're in the same grammatical form. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Little note, long remember what we say here, never forget what they did here. What we say here, what they did here, all parallel. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us. You'll notice that there are examples of parallelism in this sentence and the last. Dedicated here and here dedicated are parallel. The unfinished work and the great task remaining are parallel. To continue, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Notice the phrases increased devotion, last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Let's focus on those last three. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. The words of, by, and for are all prepositions. So they're all parallel because they are prepositional phrases. And again, there are a great many more examples of parallelism in this speech. Go back when you have a chance and find those examples and take a look at how they make the speech logical and unified. In addition, you can create logic and unity by using referrals. These are also called pronouns. Here are some examples. It, he, she, they, this, these, its, his, her, hers, their, such. These words help you link sentences by referring to someone or something that happened previously. And by using a pronoun to replace the noun, you don't have to repeat the noun. Here are some examples. The Stanford Binet IQ test has been used for many years to measure someone's verbal and spatial abilities. This test has increasingly come under fire, however, for bias. I don't take that phrase, the Stanford Binet IQ test, and repeat it. If I did, my sentences would sound very wordy. Listen to this. The Stanford Binet IQ test has been used for many years to measure someone's verbal and spatial abilities. The Stanford Binet IQ test has increasingly come under fire, however, for bias. I don't want to say the Stanford Binet IQ test twice. I would rather replace that with the referral, this test. It makes the sentences more concise and unified. Here's another example. Leonardo da Vinci is famous for many accomplishments. These include outstanding achievements in painting, technology, and science. I don't want to repeat that word accomplishments. I don't want my sentences to sound like this. Leonardo da Vinci is famous for many accomplishments. The accomplishments include. That sounds very jarring and not so smooth. So instead of repeating accomplishments, I'll use these. By using the pronoun, I link my sentences and I'm creating unity. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and link each pair of sentences with the appropriate referral. Then come back. Here are my answers. Sedimentary rocks are formed when water deposits granular soil over time. They can also be formed from deposits of organic remains of plants and animals. I use the referral they to link my sentences. The Renaissance was a time of looking back to the classical achievements of Greece, Rome, and Arabia. It was also a time of looking forward, for much remained to be discovered. And I use the referral it to refer to the Renaissance. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage about Hamlet that we've provided in your study guide. Your job is to revise the passage by filling in the blanks with the appropriate connections and transitions. Refer to the list of words and phrases as you revise. You'll find that the list will be very helpful to you. Your answers will probably be a little bit different from mine, and that's okay. When you're finished, come back. Here's my answer. Now, again, keep in mind that my answer may differ from yours. One of the big questions in Shakespeare's Hamlet is why Hamlet waits so long to exact his revenge against his uncle Claudius for murdering his father and seizing his throne. After all, he learns of this murder in Act 1, Scene 5, when his father's ghost tells him, "The serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown." Notice that I added the transitions "after all" and "this." What I've done is I've shown logic. Also, take a look back at the phrase "Hamlet waits." Keep that in mind because that phrase I had written in this essay specifically to create unity through repetition. To continue, the ghost also tells Hamlet the manner in which Claudius executed the murder. Specifically, he killed King Hamlet by pouring poison in his ear. I've got the word "also" to show addition, and I've used "specifically" to show an example. Please look carefully at that construction, the semicolon, the word, and then the comma. We've discussed that earlier. That is a very, as we said, good way to construct your sentences because they force you to have logic and coherence. Then we have the quote, "Sleeping within my orchard, my custom always of the afternoon, upon my secure hour thy uncle stole, with juice of cursed Hebanon in a vial, and in the porches of my ears did pour the leprous distilment." That example I've indicated with the term "specifically." You might have used "for example." Either one will work. To continue, nonetheless, Hamlet refuses to take action because he still demands conclusive proof of his uncle's guilt. I used "nonetheless" to show contrast. I used "because" to show result. Also take a look at that phrase, conclusive proof. I had put that in to use repetition to create more unity. To continue, as a result, Hamlet still waits until he can eavesdrop on his uncle in prayer. In Act 3, Scene 3, he hears his uncle confess to the crime. "Oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder." I used "as a result." It shows that one thing follows from the other. Notice the repetition in "Hamlet still waits." I pointed that out earlier. I've repeated that phrase because I want to emphasize the fact that he doesn't exact revenge. And by using the same phrase over, I have created unity through repetition. After this scene, Hamlet has the conclusive proof he was looking for, yet still he waits. Why? Perhaps a fault in his psychological makeup causes his inability to act. Clearly, Hamlet's paralysis of will, regardless of its cause, leads to his tragic downfall and eventual demise. In comparison, Laertes, Polonius's son, takes action immediately when Ophelia drowns herself. However, the audience comes to realize that Laertes acts too rashly, while Hamlet shows restraint. Going back to the beginning of that paragraph, after this scene, I chose that transition to show a change in time. I'm showing something that happens in a different chronological order. This transition helps me. The phrase "conclusive proof" and the phrase "still he waits." I've had conclusive proof before. I've had "still he waits" before. And I had pointed out that I use those phrases deliberately to create unity and coherence through repetition. A little further down, clearly, I'm using that transition to point out an important issue in my essay. In comparison, I'm showing differences. I'm comparing Laertes to Hamlet. However and while. However helps me move the paragraph along, and while I'm showing contrast. Now, yours will probably differ from mine, but take a look at the lists that we provided for you and make sure that you've chosen the transition that conveys your exact meaning. I used a fair number of transitions to connect ideas. You may not want to use quite this many, but choose them carefully to create logic, unity, and cohesion in your paragraphs and your essays. Let's try this again with another passage, since this skill is so important. What I would like you to do is to pause the program and read the passage about violent toys that we provided in your study guide. Again, your job is to revise the passage by filling in the blanks with appropriate connections and transitions. Refer to the list of words and phrases as you revise. Your answers will probably be different from mine. That's okay. When you're finished, come back. Certainly, some children enjoy playing with action figures, enacting mock battles, or planning attacks. No doubt this war play can be a useful outlet for aggression. Nonetheless, what message are we giving our children by marketing these products? The first transition I used, certainly, I used to show concession. No doubt and nonetheless are a little bit different. I'm using no doubt to show agreement, but I'm using nonetheless to hammer my point home, that even though you may have made a valid point with the first two, my point is more valid. So I'm using my transitions to create meaning. Further, I just want to point out that playing with action figures, enacting mock battles, and planning attacks are three parallel phrases. Next paragraph. Studies have shown that violence is a learned behavior and that parents have more control over it than they think. For instance, parents exert control over which toys children acquire because they are in charge of purchasing these toys when their children are young. Parents can also restrict which toys their children acquire through gifts as well as their own purchases. I used "and" to link ideas. I linked violence is a learned behavior with parents have more control over it than they think. I linked those two because they belong together. I used "for instance" to show an example there. And my example is parents exert control over which toys children acquire. I used "because" to show cause and effect. And my second part, they are in charge of purchasing these toys when their children are young, explains the first part. In addition, I used the word "also." That transition adds another example. So I've chosen each of my words, "and," "for instance," "because," and "also," specifically to create meaning. To continue, violent toys are especially dangerous because young children cannot separate fact from fantasy. Children learn through example and they learn through play. Furthermore, violent toys communicate violent messages. They make it too easy for children to confuse violent behavior with play. In this paragraph, I use the transition "because," again to show cause and effect. I said that toys are dangerous as a result of children not being able to separate fact from fantasy. Then I use the transition furthermore to show addition. Then I used they rather than repeat violent toys. Otherwise, my sentences would read as follows. Furthermore, violent toys communicate violent messages. Violent toys make it too easy for children to confuse violent behavior with play. That's a little bit too much repetition of violent, so I use the pronoun they instead. Take another look at this particular paragraph. You'll notice the parallel structure. Fact from fantasy. I have two nouns there. Children learn through example, and they learn through play. I've paralleled those. And violent toys, violent messages. Adjective paralleled with adjective, violent. Toys paralleled with messages, noun. So I have an adjective, noun, paralleled with an adjective, noun. This parallelism serves to unify as well as make my paragraphs sound very flowing and very smooth. Next paragraph. Through the sales of these types of toys, our society is marketing violence. For example, some stores currently sell an action figure that has blow-apart legs and carries a machine gun. In addition, children can purchase action figures that come equipped with arrows, darts, laser guns, and other weapons. Clearly, these toys lack educational value. I used for example because some stores currently sell an action figure that has blow-apart legs and carries a machine gun is an example of a toy that is being marketed for violence. I used in addition to show another example, and I used clearly for emphasis. In addition, I used a great deal of parallel structure. Has blow-apart legs, parallels, carries a machine gun. Arrows, darts, laser guns, and other weapons are all parallel because they are all nouns. Moreover, some experts believe that violence is addictive, much as certain drugs can be. They also maintain that the relationship between violent toys and violent behavior is similar to the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Not everyone who smokes will contract lung cancer, but a significant number will. I used moreover for emphasis. I used also for emphasis to show addition, and I used but to show contrast. Also take a look at the middle of this paragraph. The relationship between violent toys and violent behavior parallels the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Very similar to the way Abraham Lincoln used parallelism and repetition in his Gettysburg Address. We haven't mentioned this before, but parallelism and repetition tend to go hand in hand. Very often when you use one, you will use the other because they fit together very nicely. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and create a paragraph with these sentences. Link related ideas with some of these or all of these methods. Transitions, repetition, parallelism, and referrals. Decide which ones make the most logical sense for your purpose and your audience. Then come back. Here's my answer. My answer will differ from yours, no doubt. But like me, I'm sure you decided to try to find the way that would make the most logical sense for your purpose and audience. The first thing I did is I looked at those first 4 sentences I saw in Millie and my mother Marie, and Millie and my mother Marie, and Millie and so on and so on. And I thought, well, right there I'm seeing a lot of unnecessary repetition. I first thought perhaps I was going to put 1, 2, and 3 together, but then I decided that 1 and 2 made the most sense. So my first sentence goes like this. Aunt Millie and my mother Marie are more than sisters. They're best friends. Those two made sense because now I've got an example. They're more than sisters. The example is they're best friends. Wasn't quite sure what to do with 3. I was thinking, maybe I would leave 3 alone, but then I thought, wait a minute, 3 and 4 fit together very nicely because 3 tells what they do, they help each other out. 4 gives me a good specific example. So I have it like this. They always help each other out, especially when it comes to cleaning house. So they help each other out, and then I've got my proof, my example, especially when it comes to cleaning house. Now I'm left with the next one. They're both collectors. I don't know what I should do with that. Every June, Aunt Millie and my mother Marie have a huge garage sale. So how can I link those so they make sense? Maybe I'll take the first one and I'll use a since. So I'll go, since they're both collectors. I like that. Every June they have a huge garage sale at Aunt Millie's house. So I've done here what I did at the previous sentence. I gave an example. They're both collectors is my statement. Here's my example. They have a huge garage sale. Now I have, they lug out dolls, they lug out more dolls, they bring teacups, they bring teacups. I think that would work nicely parallel. For a week, they lug out doll after doll, teacup after teacup. So I've used some nice parallel structure there to create logic. Then I have a whole series. The lawn is carpeted with broken lamps, dented pots, chipped dishes. I don't like those sentences broken up like that because it seems choppy to me. So I'll do that as follows. The lawn is carpeted with broken lamps, dented pots, and chipped dishes. That's parallel, it's a lovely list, and it makes good sense to me. Now I have, but by the end of the weekend, it has all magically disappeared. I like adding the but because now I'm showing a contrast between the previous sentence and my last sentence. To summarize, you want to connect related ideas with transitions, repetition, parallelism, and referrals. You want to do this because it makes your writing logical and cohesive. That means all the ideas fit together very smoothly. But be very sure to link only related ideas. Do not link ideas that don't fit together in a logical way. You want to choose the method that best suits your ideas, your audience, and your purpose. When you go back in your study guide and you look at the examples that we've given you, you will notice how different writers choose different words, depending again on their ideas, their audience, and their purpose. Regardless, always strive to make your writing logical, concise, graceful, and rhythmic. Sometimes you can accomplish this by reading your sentences out loud and hearing how they flow. Avoid using too many linking devices because you don't want to create awkward sentences. Well, we've come to the end of our program. I hope that you found this instruction helpful and that you've learned some things that you can use to take your written communication to the next level. Be sure to join us for the next program in Video-Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series, Introductions and Conclusions, where you'll learn how to craft effective openings and closings to your essays. Thanks for watching.
Many students positively dread research paper assignments. Those hours and hours spent fruitlessly hunting for the right books and articles, squinting at screens of irrelevant search engine results, and scribbling useless notes on disorganized scraps of paper. But writing a research paper doesn't have to be such a stressful, time-consuming, and boring ordeal. Video-Aided Instructions Writing a Great Research Paper series is your step-by-step guide to constructing a paper that's technically correct, refreshingly original, and truly compelling. With this user-friendly series, you can recognize the value of true scholarship, master essential research techniques, Learn the insider secrets that the best writers know, dramatically improve your writing, and keep yourself motivated, productive, and relaxed throughout the entire process. Be sure to view the complete 10 DVD series, Picking an A-plus topic, Starting your research, Finding the best sources, Plagiarism and other pitfalls, Taking notes, How to be persuasive, Writing your first draft, Quoting, citing, and paraphrasing, Formatting your paper, and perfecting your final draft. Now you can successfully meet the challenge of writing a great research paper and earn a grade you can be proud of with video-aided instruction. Do you want to get your GED? Well, you're in luck. Video-aided instruction makes it easier than ever before. Our one-of-a-kind series prepares you for even the toughest questions on the 5 GED tests. Be sure to view GED Language Arts Reading, Language Arts Writing, Mathematics, Science, Social Studies, and Calculator Essentials. Let us guide you toward that all-important diploma, a better job, and of course, higher self-esteem.
When you're serious about learning an academic subject or scoring high on a test, there's just one name to know: video-aided instruction. We don't waste your time with goofy skits, corny jokes, or silly sing-alongs. We get right to the point. Real teaching by real teachers. Visit us online at videoaidedinstruction.com to learn more about our exciting line of educational programs. As we say here at Video Aided Instruction, press play to learn.